Good morning, everybody. So we will be starting right now at 9 a.m. sharp. I hope everyone had a good evening and is ready for this second day of conference. And welcome to those that are joining us also online. So before starting with the first session for the day, just a few elements of housekeeping. We will be sending you this morning an email with an evaluation survey, which hopefully you can fill in at the end of the conference. And it's very short. It shouldn't take you more than 5 minutes, but it's very valuable to us as we're planning next events such as this one. So you'll have it via email. For those that are joining us in person, it's also, you'll find the QR code at the exit there. So during a break, you can always scan it. And participants on the Zoom online, you will receive, the code will be put on, yes, you'll receive it via email. So hopefully, and if you have any issues accessing or if you did not receive the email, please let us know. So without further ado, we will start with the final session on theme 1, which is session 1.4 on mobilizing PISA evidence to understand the impact of COVID-19 on learning. And I will turn to our dear moderator, Annabella Serrao, who's a member of the PISA ADG and member of the Board of Directors of Educational Assessment. Annabella, over to you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. So today, for this session, the last presenter is Tomasz Kajderowicz. He's from Poland. He's also a member in our advisory board in PISA, is the Deputy Director for Research at Educational Research Institute in Poland, and he has long experience research in policy advisors for the impact of evaluation in education and labor market. Today he's talking to us about the impact of COVID-19 into the learning. So Thomas, you'll have 50 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and so nice to be here in the PISA conference. My presentation will be around the impact of COVID on learning losses and also its long-term consequences. So I have a feeling that some of you may feel that the COVID is over. I mean, we already passed it, the story is done. But actually, I would like to show you today that that's not true. I mean, the long-lasting effects of COVID are still with us in terms of educational losses of kids, in terms of their future educational careers, their professional careers, but also in the broader sense for the entire economy, for the GDP growth, because we have estimates from Hanuszek and Vossman on how the learning loss can translate into GDP growth and GDP losses. So in general, we are talking here about, I have a feeling about the thing that will determine lives of students and economies for the long term. And I have a feeling that we all already have overcome the issue of COVID, but that's not true. So I will show you the estimates we did with Maciej Jakubowski and also with Harry Patrinos, trying to understand the impact of COVID on students' achievements using several international large-scale assessments. We started with the first one after COVID, which was PEARLS, fourth grade PEARLS study. We published that in Economic Letters, where we presented what is the scope of the learning loss in students' achievement. And then we got PISA 2022 data that gave us the best opportunity to show the full range of learning consequences resulted from COVID, but not only from COVID. So this is in general what I would like to show you. So first of all, what is the learning loss that affected students' achievement, and then also how that differs between students in relation to their characteristics, their socioeconomic background, gender, and other characteristics. So the general conclusion is that the learning loss is around 13% of standard deviation in PISA assessment. And we know that since 2019, OECD does not offer precise estimate on how much the points translate into years of schooling. But from the previous estimates, we know that that's a bit less than 1 year of schooling worldwide. So let's say it out loud. I mean, our 15-year-olds are almost a year behind 15-year-olds from 2018 because of the school closure that we have. So the two papers I have mentioned are, as I said, one is related to the Pearls data, and second one is in revision process. It's based on PISA, again with the same authors, but the conclusion from all of these estimates are very similar, and they are showing robust learning losses that are very much correlated into the length of school closure. The funny thing about the school closure length is that actually the data on how long schools were closed is not that obvious. We have several sources of that data. One is the UNESCO database on the weeks of school closure, but also in PISA, we have a question to students for how long schools were closed due to COVID, and we have a question to principals. And you think that this data is consistent? Not at all, not at all. So the big advantage of using international large-scale assessment to analyze the learning loss is, first of all, we have around 100 countries, so we can compare across different characteristics what is the learning loss. But again, the data on the school closure varies very heavily. I will show you just a few examples. So if you look at those three different sources. So we have from UNESCO, we have a full school closure and partial school closure, and we have from PISA students' reports and principal reports. And you see these are all the weeks of school closure, how this data differs. I mean, these are the same students and the same schools, but why? What is the root of this huge difference? Well, the issue is that schools were not always fully closed or fully open. Sometimes it was a hybrid mode or something like that. So the perception of students, principals, and the governments were slightly different. So what I will show you today is the result from the most recent estimate of the school closure using PISA 2022. Of course, we will have very soon, in around 1 week, TIMSS data release. But please note that TIMSS most of countries are doing that on the 4th grade, some of also the 8th grade, but the 4th grade in 2023, kids are almost already forgot about COVID because it was already around 3 years before, so they were not that affected by the school closure. But anyways, we are analyzing the data as well. So what PISA data gives us, we use the sample of, 175 million students, pooled data from all PISA editions aged 15 from 72 countries. And what we were trying to measure is the deviation from the long-term trend that is related to the COVID school closure. So we estimated trends for each country, and also we incorporated, we controlled for students' characteristics, school characteristics, and then the estimate of the school closure controlling for students' school and long-term trends is the departure from that long-term trends. We were doing several robustness checks, including and excluding different control variables. We were also doing the placebo tests, so by excluding some additions from this study. and this is the model that we were using. So we actually estimated two models. One was related to just the departure related to being in the 2022 edition, again controlling for the long-term trends, but also we were using interaction of the length of school closure in 2022 and how the length of school closure using these different measures of the length of school closure, so both the UNESCO data and the principal reports and the students' reports, and how that translates into the learning losses. So, what are the results of our estimates? Between these two assessments, they are very robust. From the Pearls assessment, this was the first post-COVID assessment of the fourth grades, we see that in general, departure from the linear trend in 2021 was, depending on the specification, between 14 to 27 points on the Pearl scale for fourth graders. You see the different model specification and different control variables that were used in the model. And every week of school closure translated into almost 0.8 of learning loss in Pearl's points. So graphically, these are all using, again, control for the country-specific trends. This is the this is the PISA departure from the long-term trend in the assessment. So you clearly see that the learning loss that we experience in PISA 2022 is real, is tremendous, and is really affecting students' achievement, and thus everything in their lives. So actually, that's quite surprising. Then in the year 2024, this is the only paper that takes up the issue of the COVID school closure. This is something we will deal for years. And I have that feeling that we have overcome this issue in our minds, and it's not justified. It's still with us, and it affects educational systems worldwide. This is, in contrary, the Pearl's departure from the long-term trend. So you see how robust, despite the different data source, despite the different subject, because in Pearl's you use reading comprehension. In PISA, we used the major domain from 2022, so this is mathematics. So you see that school closure affected both reading achievement in 2021 and mathematics achievement in 2022 in a very heavy way. You see the estimate, the departure from the long-term trend is almost 30 points on the PISA scale, which is on the Pearl scale, and here on the PISA scale, it's around less than 15 points. So this is in general how the departure looks like. If we look at different estimates depending on the model specification from PISA, so this is what we mainly would like to show, you see that the departure in 2022 is different in relation to the control variables we used, but in general the message is very consistent. And you see how differently captured the length of school closure can have the different estimates on the impact of the length into the achievement. But if you merge all that results together, you will see a very clear and consistent picture with the longer schools were closed, the more visible, and then the bigger is the learning loss. And here you see the learning loss depending on the length of school closure. And for the longest school closures, the learning loss reaches almost 20 points, so 0.2 of standard deviation on the standard PISA scale, which is really, really a lot. Comparing these two estimates in PISA and Pearls, in Pearls the the achievement declined by between 18 to 33 percent of standard deviation. In PISA, it's a bit less. Two reasons. I mean, in 2022, already COVID passed for some time, so students were back in schools for some time. And you see that the PISA and Pearls estimates are consistently showing that the learning loss was proportional to the school closure. If you look at the achievement quantiles, you see that who lost the most? of course, the most disadvantaged students, and of course, those with the lowest results. So you see also that for those students for whom the learning loss was the largest, these are students where the schools were closed for the longest time, and these are students from the lowest achievement quantiles. So you see how impactful was learning loss also, especially for those who we should protect the most. One interesting conclusion, if you dive deeper into the learning losses, is that if you take the absolutely longest school closures, equal really from 20 to even more, to almost 40 school closure weeks, and in UNESCO database it reached almost 77 weeks of full or partial closure. The impact by quantiles of achievement is inverted. Actually, those countries, these are the students from the least advantaged countries. So you see that in general, when the schools were closed for a short times, the best students, the learning loss was not that big. I mean, they managed to deal with that. But in the countries where the learning loss was the highest, and in the countries and in the countries where school closed were for the longest time, also the best students lost really a lot. I mean, actually, it ruined their learning over the school closure in a total disruptive way. So just to we have done several analyses interacting students' characteristics with their learning loss, and we see that low achievers lost the most. We see that the male students lost the most also when the schools were closed for longest times. And we see also that the inequalities widened in PISA data, reaching by 7% increase in the achievement gap between the socioeconomic status. And as I mentioned at the beginning, this will not only affect learning of these 3 or 4 cohorts. If you look at the estimates that were done by Hanuszek and Vosman, so we know from the year 2010, but also the more recent estimates, we see that the one standard deviation in PISA translates into around 1.74% of GDP growth. This is based on the long-term correlation between the PISA achievement and the GDP growth. I mean, there were several, it differs a lot, it varies by the specification of the model, but that's the average. Quite consistently, we can see that in the data. And if you will translate it to then the learning loss we see that resulted from COVID, and if you use this parameter to show the economic consequences of that learning loss, you see that $17 trillion is worth the learning loss that we see in the PISA data. Using Saharopoulos estimates on the individual wages, how the PISA score correlates with the individual wages in the long term, you see that also this will affect individual earnings over lifetime of students. We still say not enough, but we talk not enough about the learning loss and the long-term effects that the learning loss will have on all of us and our economies. Thank you so much.
Now it's working. So thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I will now open the floor directly to the audience so they can ask you questions about this interesting paper. I would like you, before asking questions, to please state your name and institution or country, as you prefer, so we can know the people that is asking. I will take 2 questions because Thomas is in a rush. So we have one here.
Leuven.
Do you want to stay there or do you want?
I will join you.
Ides Nikes from Leuven University. Thank you very much. I'm aware of the literature on this topic, and it's really scaring. My question is about how you define disadvantage, because at one point you said the lowest performers, and on the other hand, you spoke about most disadvantaged. Now, I'm asking the question because in Flanders, we found that the lowest performers, generally speaking, suffered most, but not the most disadvantaged students, socioeconomically disadvantaged, for the very reason that teachers made extreme efforts to go on home visits, etc., and provide extra support to the most disadvantaged. So the socioeconomic gap did not increase in our country. How exactly did you measure disadvantage?
Jenny?
Answer? No. No.
Let's hear it. Jenny, please.
Okay, Jenny from Germany. Can you elaborate a little bit on how you define the learning, the trend, the deviation from the trend? So how you expect, how you established what the trend should have been? Thanks.
Okay, so first answering the first question related to the achievement distribution or the socioeconomic status. So we did both. I mean, we used the quantile regression on the achievement, showing what is the learning loss in relation to achievement, and also using the socioeconomic, the ESES variable in PISA, which is the socioeconomic status. And actually, what you mentioned at the end is that for in the very rich and advanced countries, teachers made huge effort to support students from disadvantaged backgrounds. So we see that in the data in that inverted curve of the learning loss. So we see that in some countries, those students with disadvantaged background, their loss is lower. But so we did both, but in general, worldwide, the conclusion on the 175 million students over the all cycles of PISA, that the conclusion is clear. Those who are disadvantaged lost the most, and those who are from the low achievement quantiles lost the most. I mean, of course, there are exceptions from the wealthy countries where the policies were really supporting students when the schools were closed. In relation to how we defined the departure from the long-term trends, so we estimated the long-term parameter trend for all of the countries until the PISA 2019 edition. And then we extrapolated the trend, and the deviation in 2022 was the actual achievement and how this was different from the predicted achievement based on the long-term trend. As I said, we did the placebo test, so we did exclusions one by 1 year to see how the long-term trend is robust. And then this is how we define the departure from the long-term trend in PISA 2022 as the constant, but also as the interaction with the length of school closure.
If anyone wants to have another question, perhaps online, do we have any question?
Hello, really short one. Yeah, really short one. You mentioned that your assumption would be that COVID didn't have impact on teams.
Sorry to interrupt. Is your micro working?
Maybe can you hear me? Yeah, just a really short one. You mentioned that you think that COVID-19 didn't affect TIMSS results. Maybe you can elaborate on that a bit more, since TIMSS results we are presenting next week. And we are also discussing amongst ourselves whether we can explain data due to the COVID.
Okay, so we don't know the results yet. What I was mentioning is that the fourth graders in 2023 already almost forgot about the COVID school closure because they experienced school closures not at all or only at the beginning of the first grade. So already time has passed. So the most of their school life is already in the open schools. And we don't know yet the impact of the school closure on their achievement. We will see that in the data on the 4th of December. But I mean, as the time flies, the time since the schools were closed already is quite long.
So we have one online.
Yep. So there's one question online, which is, yes, the effects of COVID is still persistent, more evidently in school education. Could the speaker suggest some solutions for this? That could be your standout.
Okay. So solutions, that's that's not related to the estimate. That's the remedy strategies you can implement. So my main point is that and the entire cognitive science shows us that it's not like we will overcome this problem so we can just move further and students will like come up with going back on track. It's not like that. From the cognitive science, we know that if there are lacks in the achievement, you can without addressing them directly, you cannot actually go further because you will not learn the entire stuff, and this will impact their students' learning over their lifetime and their professional life and so on. So what I'm saying and postulating is that the remedy strategies should continue approaching the learning loss of the affected cohorts, because it's not like that we can just ignore this issue and say the COVID is past, it's gone, because there are those long-lasting effects that not addressed will result in individual lives and also entire economies. I mean, what are these strategies? We can learn from the countries that were doing that in quite a nice way during COVID. I mean, extra curricular classes, some even online tutoring, and also addressing these cohorts in the higher education when they are going through their programs. I mean, there are several things that can be done. The worst we can do is to ignore it and just forget about COVID because it's still with us.
So thank you very much.